The Vice President of the United States must resign. You cannot represent this country if, as evidence mounts, that your government simply decided to kill 11 random Venezuelans on a boat in international waters in the Caribbean and then declare they were Tren de Aragua gang drug runners, even though Tren de Aragua drug runners don't travel in groups of more than 3, and even if there had been 30 of them, it would have been easy to just stop the boat, board her, seize everyone and everything on board, and at least hold nominal trials like we used to do it before the Trump dictatorship. You cannot represent this country in any position. You are permanently disqualified when you respond to this by asserting, quote, killing cartel members who poison our fellow citizens is the highest and best use of our military. In an extra legal flex that could and hopefully will get you life in prison from the International Court of Justice. And you especially cannot represent this country when a Krassenstein brother claps back on social media, this is called a war crime, and your reply to that, Mr. Vance, is, quote, I don't give a shit what you call it. I have no objection to the profanity. So far, that's the nicest thing I thought of about Jayvee Vance. I object the way Rand Paul objects, and my God, when Rand Paul and I are on the same side of anything, the individual on the other side is necessarily the scum of the universe, not merely of the earth. Quote, what a despicable and thoughtless sentiment it is to glorify killing someone without a trial, the senator posted. Did he ever read To Kill a Mockingbird? Did he ever wonder what might happen if the accused were immediately executed without trial or representation? It's an odd poll there, To Kill a Mockingbird. I would have gone with the Constitution, or I would have gone with a theoretical that might have meant more a little bit to Jayvee. If some other dictator besides Trump, like, say, Maduro of Venezuela, were to declare the Trump cabinet a cartel or a terrorist organization, and Vance were traveling on board or on a plane in international waters, Vance would have just justified Maduro bombing the boat or the plane or the yacht or whatever and killing all on board. Gee, Jayvee, you have just invited Maduro to try to blow you up. Good call, brother. There is also the deeper issue here. Eyeliner aside, Vance is obviously unstable. What he wrote is the antithesis of everything America has ever stood for, even in its darkest moments. Even George Bush and Dick Cheney used to present, or at least fabricate, evidence that somebody was a terrorist before killing them or imprisoning them without trial. Vance is not attacking the cartels and the poisoners of citizens. He is not standing up for American drug victims. He is not doing something noble here. He is not making the Democrats look bad. He is glorifying and becoming the cartels and the killers of American citizens. Vance is also so divorced from reality. He is also actively campaigning for war and campaigning against war simultaneously. On the same day he decided to repurpose the military into a random death squad in international waters, he also wrote, quote, Democrats, let's send your kids to die in Russia. Republicans, actually, let's protect our people from the scum of the earth. Setting aside the idea that the scum of the earth are Donald Trump and people who work for him, no Democrats have ever said anything like that. Vance also seems to think there's a difference where your kids die, in Russia or in Venezuela, in a war, or let's say we call the thing in Venezuela a special military action that Trump provokes with shit like this illegal bombing. A war which, of course, lines up neatly with the Trump-Vance campaign, which was predicated on ending the forever wars. Apparently, there was a second half to that sentence that they only whispered or maybe mimed, ending the forever wars and replacing them with new ones. Vance must resign. He won't. But if you need any more last bit of evidence that Vance is too mentally damaged to continue to serve in office, the inarguable proof that he could not pass a sanity test, Jayvee, you actually bothered to exchange Twitter jibes with one of the Krassenstein brothers? I mean, you'll be arguing with the colorization bot next. Now, why is all this happening? Why are we ginning up a war with Venezuela? Well, Trumpstein. Every time the fuse to Trump's Jeffrey Epstein cover-up time bomb goes out, Trump happily lights it back up again. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, if you miss this, it goes by quickly, so listen close.
He's not saying that what Epstein did is a hoax. It's a terrible, unspeakable evil. He believes that himself. When he first heard the rumor, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. He was an FBI informant to try to take this stuff down. The president knows and has great sympathy for the women who have suffered these unspeakable harms. It's detestable to him. He and I have spoken about this as recently as 24 hours ago.
Trump was an FBI informant on the Epstein what now? Trump narked on Epstein. That's what you're going with, Mikey. Actually, late yesterday, a mere 72 hours after he said that, Mike Johnson issued a clarification. The Washington Post said he, quote, backed off his claim that Trump was an FBI informant, unquote. To say that is a generous characterization is ungenerous. To say that might have been dictated by Trump to Jeff Bezos is much more believable. Here is what the Johnson statement is. Quote, the speaker is reiterating what the victim's attorney said, which is that Donald Trump, who kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, was the only one more than a decade ago willing to help prosecutors expose Epstein for being a disgusting child predator, unquote. That's not what Johnson meant. You heard it. He meant FBI informant. He said FBI informant. He didn't reiterate something. He reiterated my ass. Also, quote, the only one more than a decade ago more than a decade ago is 2014 or earlier, like 2009, 2006. That still puts it in the crimes were just recently committed window, and it still means Trump was an informant. You've heard of non-denial denials. This, for many reasons I will now outline, is a non-back-off. Firstly, actually, this is one of the foundational canons of QAnon that Trump has been secretly fighting the pedophiles. Maybe from on the inside. That if he is in the Epstein files, it's because he was Ace Ventura or something in disguise. Yes, those children were for America. If that doesn't push the limits of logic, there is this additional question. Trump, already a Republican during the prosecution of Epstein, a Republican president during the incarceration of Epstein, a Republican president during the death of Epstein, was part of a Democratic hoax. Adds up. And of course, best of all, there is one small detail Trump overlooked when test marketing bullshit excuses for when Trump's part in the Epstein scandal leaks out some other way, which is what the Speaker of the House QAnon blip was, test marketing, an excuse. The small detail is this. If Trump informed on Epstein, Trump had to have witnessed, seen, perhaps participated in what Epstein was doing. And we know what Epstein was doing. He was raping children, trafficking children, destroying children. And Trump told all he saw, which means he's known all this all along. 20 years worth, according to his own timeline, since he saw Epstein. And in that 20 years, he never did anything about it other than hide it from the public. During 3 different presidential elections he ran in, And it doesn't stop there. Trump is now writing self-incriminating posts. Democrats, quote, knew everything there was to know about Epstein, but now, years after his death, they, out of nowhere, are seeming to show such love and heartfelt concern for his victims. Who knew everything there was to know about Epstein? Maybe FBI informant Donald Trump? Then there is, of all things, a James O'Keefe video of the Trump Department of Justice honcho trying to impress his online date matchup by explaining that when push comes to shove, DOJ will simply, quote, redact every Republican, unquote, from the Epstein client list, and that, yes, Ghislaine Maxwell was moved to Club Fed as part of a deal. This guy's name is Joseph Schnitt of the Office of Enforcement Operations. Schnitt, comma, as in full of. And listen, if you are going to take this country to full dictatorship, could you at least get the people helping you do it, Trump, who have stupider names even than Trump, to change these stupid names? Who wrote this report? Why, it was Deputy Chief of Staff Schnitt, sir. It's obviously Schnitt writing all over it. It's his uniquely Schnitty style. This reeks of Schnitt. Trump narked on Epstein is not the flex Trump thinks it is. And if all the rest of it is irrelevant, remember this, anything that keeps the Epstein story alive hurts Trump and lets the cement harden further around the fact that Jeffrey Epstein is now a permanent part of this Trump regime. As sure as if he were, just to take one at random, Secretary of Education. Then there is Trump not merely hamstringing the mainstream media, but taking it over by bullying and intimidation and getting now pre-censorship. Disney and ABC capitulated to a Trump demand that any protests to his appearance at the U.S. Tennis Open final here yesterday not be shown on live television. They showed him during the national anthem. There was mixed reaction to him. They did not show his arrival, which held up the start of play and kept thousands of fans outside the arena. And they did not show the audio or play the audio of his arrival, which was pretty much all booing. And in a cute twist, that was live streamed by Fox. The Trump threat to ABC was washed through the U.S. Tennis Association, the people who have joyously managed to turn their sport, tennis, from the third or fourth most popular spectator sport in this country 40 years ago to something like 10th today, below the WNBA, UFC, and soccer. But make no mistake, it was Disney that agreed not to show Trump getting booed, except when it was unavoidable during the anthem. This pre-censorship. Sure, the emperor has no clothes, but you can't say that, or not only will the emperor punish your network, but we, the event organizers, will also punish your network. That went over so well here in New York that when George Conway joked online that all cell service would be shut off for the day in Queens so nobody could use their phones to record Trump getting booed, it was assumed there was a good chance George was simply reporting something that had actually happened. I was going to post another joke about Trump having the finalist Carlos Alcaraz of Spain get seized by ICE so Trump could take his place in the championship match, but I toned it down because no, the ISIS raids aren't funny. They're not at all funny. And B, given that Trump has already taken the World Cup soccer trophy to keep for his own, this too was far too close to reality to assume that everybody would get that it was a joke, especially the part about how Trump would insist that before the match even began, he was already up 6-love, 5-love. The irony in the drama over Disney, which is now run by an old man trying to hang on to being chairman at any price, including the end of democracy, you'll pay that, not Bob Iger, is that merely making sure real-time criticism of Trump does not reach any of his supporters watching non-political television is so old-fashioned and Luddite that it was only the second worst capitulation of the week and the far less dangerous of the two. CBS, which has already lost all of its credibility via a series of ethical collapses regarding and bribes to Trump, took the inevitable next step. Kristi Noem, a dangerous, murderous, soulless individual who also acts exactly as one would if one were heavily medicated, was furious that some of her slanders of the Job of our times, Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, were edited out of an interview on Face the Nation because CBS rightly suspected they were not only not true but malicious, since it is still the law in this country that just because you are the news and you didn't say it, the brainless Trump humanoid over there with the Botox did, that does not mean the victim can't sue her and you. CBS News is supposed to, by law, edit out such falsehoods unless there is a means of countering them with real-time fact checks of equal or greater weight. Noem went into governmental Karen mode. CBS was threatened again. They were threatened again because they capitulated all the other times. That's what happens when you give in to blackmail. Columbia University, Claire Shipman, Apple, and all the others. And having already started down the path to hell, CBS, of course, capitulated again. Just to open the umbrella, as my grandmother used to say, CBS also had to make up an excuse for folding to this Noem-Trump threat. In response to, quote, I love this part, in response to, quote, audience feedback over the past week, the proverbial audience of one, a Mr. John Barron of Washington, D.C., he kept calling in 381 times. In response to that, quote, Face the Nation will now only broadcast live or live-to-tape interviews subject to national security or legal restrictions. This extra measure means the television audience will see the full unedited interview on CBS. What it actually means is CBS is now guaranteeing that any Trump official who needs to demonize an immigrant or make up some bullshit about why they just killed 11 people in the open ocean in the Caribbean or needs to scapegoat a Democrat will get to do so on CBS with no interference from these silly things called the truth or journalism. CBS is now fully in the stenography business. There are holdouts there. Since they are what remains of any CBS News integrity, soon or late they will be jettisoned because the next time Trump complains, who else are these baboons, David Ellison and Jeff Shell, going to present as the next human sacrifices? There's nobody and nothing left at CBS. Not in management, anyway. David Ellison already doesn't have any eyebrows. Into the volcano you go, boys. Incidentally, and as an aside before I get to a greater and somewhat positive point, the dark secret at CBS is it has a deep and dark history of overreacting and showing cowardice just like this, in tone if not in deadliness. After Edward R. Murrow put the final stake in the heart of Joe McCarthy in the 1954 famous broadcasts of See It Now, CBS News dined out on that 1 month of great programming and ethics for decades. Literally until the Trump bribe over the Kamala Harris interview. So what? 70-plus years. CBS just had to hold up a sign going, Murrow McCarthy, and all arguments ended. But in 1954, back at the ranch, and they did not exactly publicize the reality of this, after the season that included Murrow's episode of See It Now devoted to Senator McCarthy, Murrow never again anchored a regular news program in prime time on CBS. Never again. See It Now was sent to the wasteland of weekend daytime TV, except for a few specials. In fact, when the quiz show scandal hit in 1959, CBS president Frank Stanton loudly boasted that CBS would end all pre-rehearsed portions of all its programs, like the rigged quiz shows, and, crazily, Edward R. Murrow's entertainment interview show Person to Person, in which cameras, 1959-sized cameras, were pushed around the homes of celebrities while Murrow interviewed them from a New York studio. If you did not rehearse those camera moves, you could have knocked out a retaining wall with a 1959 TV camera. Stanton said that evil rehearsal would cease. Murrow blew his top. It led to Murrow leaving CBS. And by the way, Stanton was such a fraud that while he was being grilled by a congressional committee over the quiz scandal, about which Stanton's mealy-mouthed response led to Murrow's end, while that was happening, Stanton told the committee that the overall influence of CBS was still a positive because of Murrow's See It Now specials. Presidents change. Media comes and goes. Management is forever scum. To get back to today, there is a silver lining, as I mentioned, behind the cowardice at ABC and CBS. It underscores that the Trump dictatorship is far less popular than even it or the stenographic media claim. If you have to not only beat up the critics and threaten the bosses, but make sure your bullshit is broadcast instead of the truth, and deny journalists the right to say the truth in advance, your presidency, your government, must actually be hanging by a very frayed thread. Which segues neatly into a brief recap of the polls. Trump's destruction of the economy is gaining steam, and among the jobs lost since January, 500,000 held by native-born Americans gone. Jobs held by immigrants up by 50,000. This is heresy in MAGA land. The impact is showing in the polls. Just a moment on that. Manufacturing jobs are down for the fourth straight month when he promised a rebirth of them. New jobs in August, 50,000 less than expected. And the June and July job growth numbers were revised downwards, and June is now in rapid unscheduled disassembly mode. June is now down 22,000. It is so bad that the idiot Howard Lutnick had a Freudian slip of biblical proportions. Asked to describe a non-existent trade or tariff deal with the Japanese, he meant to say it was off the charts, or maybe he was going to be cool and say it was off the hook, or something. In fact, Howard Lutnick said, with that stupid used car salesman's grin frozen on his face, "It's off the rails." You bet your ass it is. It's off the rails. Again, not the flex you thought it was, Howard. So, the Trump polls are terrible. CBS, 65% of Americans say food prices are going up because of Trump's policies. 66% say we should not be willing to pay more for anything if that means supporting Trump's policies. His approval overall is at 44 in the CBS poll, up 2 as Republican support increased for him. That's the circle the wagons effect. But he's still underwater by 12. 43 approval in NBC, underwater by 14. 42 approval in Strength in Numbers Vericite. But Elliot Morris of Strength in Numbers says we are missing the real poll number. In January, 34% of Americans strongly approved of Trump. It is now 24% who strongly approve of him. In January, 36% of Americans strongly disapproved of Trump. Now it's 46% strongly disapprove of him. His strong supporters are down by a third. His strong haters are up by a third. This is a recipe for midterm Republican disaster, even if it merely holds at this point and does not get any worse. From the end End of CBS News and Trump in the polls, getting back to the cabinet and this second-rate gang posing as a government. If you had to impeach just the ones who threatened life on the planet and you could knock them out at 1 an hour, it would still take you a week. Trump, Vance, Bondi, Hegseth, Gabbard, Patel, but first RFK Jr., and then this guy over at the Federal Housing Finance Agency, Pulte. RFK Jr. is intellectually challenged. Therefore, he must be the savior who exposes who caused intellectual challenge and altered brain development, because it can't just have happened due to biology, and it certainly can't be his fault, and it can't be the kind of drug use that would have killed Keith Richards in 1 week. Trump evaded military service, dodged it, if you want to be mean. He skipped Vietnam, so when he escalates his takeover of the army and his conversion of it into his personal Praetorian Guard, and he sicks it on Chicago because that's a Democratic city in a state with a Democratic governor who could kick his ass. And because protesters have tied him up there for years trying to stop his giant Trump crap shack tower out there, of course the meme he chooses shows him in Robert Duvall's cavalry hat from the movie Apocalypse Now with the helicopters and firefights from Vietnam. Because then somewhere in the empty, infected attic that is in his brain, this allows Trump to believe for a second that he really fought in Vietnam and didn't run away or find some alternate way to serve or faked bone spurs or shat his pants or whatever he did. No, the pants shatting thing was Ted Nugent, wasn't it? I have discussed previously what a friend of mine, a psychiatric professional, explained to me about people like Kennedy and Trump, the public-face, private reality people. You know the types, the homophobe who is a customer of gay prostitutes, the anti-abortion bomber who is paid for a dozen abortions, the, say, Bible-thumping anti-porn fascist head of education who has video of naked women playing on a monitor in his office during an official state meeting of the Board of Education. I call my psych pros explanation the basketball scoreboard theory of rationalization. Whatever you've done, you then publicly oppose and punish others who do it so much and so venomously that in your mind, if your gay, porn, drugs, cowardice conduct is, say, 90 points on a basketball game, you simply have to do so much the other way to punish, to crush, to kill those who are doing the same thing you are, that your opposition to what you are doing and what they are doing is 100. And that means you're not really gay or a porn or drug addict or a coward who evaded Vietnam. And the final score is 100 to 90. See? You didn't do it. You opposed it. 100 times out of 190. So RFK Jr. is out there selling crackpot, borderline Salem witch trial superstitions about where autism comes from. He, of course, is the picture of health himself. Face looks like he's the portrait of Dorian Gray, voice like the Crypt Keepers. So Trump puts out a meme of himself in Vietnam as if the thing that will still be in his obituary won't be, and he evaded service in Vietnam. And he puts out this meme with a caption that he thinks reads, Chai-pocalypse now, but normal people see and hear in their minds, chip-ocalypse now? Chip? Ooh, chocolate chip cookies. He's sending chocolate chip cookies to Chicago. Basketball scoreboard syndrome. The draft dodger becomes the Vietnam napalm dropper. The man who destroyed his own brain with illegal drugs has to find somebody else who damaged other brains with other drugs. And I wonder today if this mag-ass clown Bill Pulte doesn't suffer from basketball scoreboard syndrome just as much as Trump and Kennedy do. Bill Pulte is the scumbag Nepo grandbaby of the Midwestern real estate honcho William Pulte. And scumbag here is used ironically. The elder Pulte had 14 children. This grandson went to Northwestern for broadcast journalism, didn't get a job in media, instead went into his grandfather's company, and then became a MAGA attack dog and became a donor, and Trump therefore made him head of something, in this case the Federal Housing Finance Agency, where while his job is to get cheap housing built for poor people, F that. He has done only one thing in office, try to get Trump's political opponents for technical violations on their mortgage applications. It is Pulte who gave Trump the excuse to try to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook by alleging, not convicting, not charging, just alleging that she listed multiple primary residences on loan apps. Trump has used the same attack on Senator Schiff of California and New York Attorney General Letitia James. And what do Schiff and Tish James have in common? All right. James convicted Trump of business corruption here, and Schiff led the Trump impeachment, the first one. Not the second one. Not the one in early 2027, the first one. Oh, they may have listed more than one primary residence to get a tax break via the homestead exemption in wealthy neighborhoods. Then it turned out that 3 of the dumber members of Trump's cabinet allegedly did the same damn thing, which we never would have known of if you hadn't brought up the stuff about Lisa Cook. The labor clown, Lori Chavez DeRemer, who thinks she was elected labor secretary, she's on this list. Transportation Secretary Sean Crash Davis Duffy, he's on the list. EPA Administrator Lee, the Z is for zero, Zeldin, he's on the list. And Trump stooge Ken Paxton, the eye-on-the-ball Attorney General of Texas. Bill Pulte didn't out them for multiple primary residences, yet reportedly they filled out these forms the same way. And now, guess what? It has reached its apotheosis. Bill Pulte's father and his stepmother. If you missed this, Reuters broke it, quoting them. Mark and Julie Pulte, the father and stepmother of Bill Pulte, President Trump's appointee as director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, since 2020 have claimed so-called homestead exemptions for residences in wealthy neighborhoods in both Michigan and Florida, according to the records. The exemption is meant to give a discount to homeowners on taxes for properties they use as their primary residence. One, primary, not residences. No comment from Bill Pulte as to whether or not he will press Trump to prosecute his own father, or Paxton, or Zeldin, or Duffy, or DeRemer, or whoever is next. His own father reportedly did this. He's now persecuting other people who did this. The basketball scoreboard theory of rationalization and compensation abides. This is how one gets hoist on one's own petard. Which reminds me that last week I compared this phenomenon of attacking others for what you yourself have done to the baboon Laura Loomer, who threatened to deport the judge who stopped Trump's efforts to traffic children to Guatemala because the judge wasn't born in America, and we can't have judges who were not born in America, and the judge Sparkle Suknanan was born in Trinidad, and Loomer thinks we should go back, she should go back there, and Loomer didn't even bother to Google foreign-born judges. When Trump's concierge judge, Eileen Cannon, was born not just abroad, but in Colombia, Cali. Aren't we blowing up drug runners? Suspected drug runners? People who we just claim are drug runners? Isn't Jayvee Vance asserting the right to blow up Eileen Cannon? Well, just to button this up, I didn't bring back Judge Cannon just for the hell of it. Newsmax sued Fox News. Let them fight on antitrust charges. Now, there is an irony in this, I must note. A suit by Newsmax against Rupert Murdoch, pivoting on the word trust. Anyway, the case has now been thrown out on technical reasons. It can be refiled, and it was thrown out by the Judge Eileen Cannon. And the last laugh for you, Pam Blondie, Ms. DEI at the DOJ with the unnaturally deep voice, has a team working on some way to make sure transgender people lose their rights to possess firearms. Setting aside the prejudice and what it warns about a Nazi-style approach to trans people and trans issues, the Trump administration is going to propose tightening the gun laws, which naturally means that the NRA has had to come out with a statement defending trans people. As my late friend William Hurt will say for all time in the movie classic Body Heat, sometimes the shit comes down so heavy, I feel like I should wear a hat. Also of interest here, the guy who destroyed CNN may have just admitted he's prejudiced against black people. Oops! And if you think I was kidding about CBS News and stenography, its chief Washington analyst got an exclusive with Trump in which Trump made his same transparently nonsensical claim that something would happen soon with Ukraine and Russia, and instead of this guy asking, haven't you already said that 111 times? This guy just let Trump pee on his leg. And then he put the story out as exclusive, Trump pees on my leg by Robert Costa, CBS News. That's next. This is Countdown. Bill Hurt, wherever you are, can I borrow your hat?
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead on this edition of Countdown. Have you heard about this? The all-time classic film from 1942 that got butchered by its studio. The Orson Welles follow-up to Citizen Kane, The Magnificent Ambersons. Those who saw the original cut claimed it might have been better than Citizen Kane. They all said it was fantastic, it was indescribable, and the studio cut 40 minutes out of it. Apparently, the fantastic parts they didn't think would sell, and they tacked on a happy ending. Now, an AI company is going to use production still photographs and scripts and other actors dressed like the original characters and computer generation to change their faces and all the nightmares of AI to try to recreate the original Orson Welles version of The Magnificent Ambersons to see if AI can do it and not put Marvel comic book characters in it or something. It's appalling. It opens Pandora's box. It's a terrible precedent, and if they make it, this new AI version of The Magnificent Ambersons available to me, I will only watch it 81 times. I'm conflicted, in part because I met the star of the film. Orson Welles does not appear in The Magnificent Ambersons other than a couple of voiceovers. Tim Holt and Dolores Costello and Joseph Cotten are the stars. And I actually met Joseph Cotten 40 years ago this Christmas. And when I met him, I didn't realize it was him. He's in Citizen Kane, and I thought oh, God. It is one of my favorite Keith is an Idiot stories from my days in Hollywood, next in Things I Promised Not to Tell. First, believe it or not, there's still more new idiots to talk about besides myself, the roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's other worst persons in the world. The bronze, worse, Gunther Eagleman, and those like him. Gunther is actually a disgraced ex-cop named, I don't know, it's on the internet, who cares? He posts crazed MAGA Trump fascist bullshit, and he chose, there wasn't some sort of community service involved in this. He chose the name Gunther Eagleman as his new name. I guess because Twerpston Howling Asshole III was already in use. That's my only conclusion. You would choose Gunther Eagleman to get the gun and the eagle in your name? Guy has an IQ of an eagle. Anyway, I have no idea if any of this is true, but to use his approach to the world, this confirms my suspicions, so I'll report it. quote the people who reported it anyway. My suspicion has always been that if and when we survive all this and J.D. Vance is in jail with Hannity and the Ukrainians have led a coup that kills Putin, he just fell out the window. I don't know, it was the 90th floor or whatever, and we find the Rosetta Stone of the last 10, 12 years, it will simply be a ledger with a series of bank transfers and deposited checks in it. It's all about money. It's all money. It's easy to buy people. It's easier than you think. Some of them will sell their souls for $200. A libertarian conservative Twitter account called @AnkAesthetics, handle Aesthetica, posted the following the other day with examples, but I'm just going to read the lead one. List of paid propaganda accounts who took money to shill for India. Well, that adds a new element to this. And the list is from Aesthetica. I have no idea about the validity of any of this. @Gunther Eagleman, @ElectionWiz, @Chuck Calesto. Chuck Calesto is the guy with the picture with the sunglasses perched on top of his head. @IAnon Patriot, @Ryan A. Fournier. Ryan A. Fournier is like the teenager with the big duck's ass hairdo. @DC Drano, we know about him. He's one of the guys the Trump administration used with the fake Epstein folder that they bought at Staples. And a couple of other names. Defiant L's. I've heard of them. Then the account asked if they'd left anybody out. Oh, the answers were interesting. @ANC, lowercase hyphen, what is that called? Underscore. @ANC Aesthetics, AESTHETICS, if you want to follow up on that. The runner-up, worser, John Malone. You remember John? The guy who got lucky enough to put cables in the ground, the fascist who bought and destroyed CNN. John kind of said the quiet part out loud on a podcast, while insisting that CNN, which now puts the liar Scott Jennings on for hours at a stretch, and refused to fact-check Trump in a presidential debate, and hasn't fired the deplorable Jake Tapper yet, and leaves the ninny Dana Bash on the air. I saw her on my block the other day. She's about 3 feet tall. Anyway, CNN, which used to have an audience. Malone, who effectively owns it through his company, which owns the majority of the David Zaslav, Warner Bros. Discovery outfit, Malone still thinks CNN is biased against Trump, which means, of course, in MAGA cuckoo land, that CNN is not actively lying for Trump 24 hours a day, which is what this fascist billionaire Malone wants. It's only lying for Trump like 10 hours a day. But in doing this, he made a huge mistake. A little much, too much information about himself. The old TMI syndrome, the old your sins will eventually come out because you can't maintain the energy levels necessary to contain them. John Malone, quote, "Look, the trouble with bias is it's almost invisible. And the person who, look, these are good people," meaning the ones at CNN, "these are people who believe they're not biased, okay? They really believe that. It's just like an awful lot of us white folks say, we're not biased about blacks, okay? But it's embedded." Who's this us, Malone? You're saying you claim not to be biased about blacks, but it's embedded in you? Is that what you're saying? It's just like an awful lot of us white folks say we're not biased about blacks, okay, but it's embedded. I'm shocked that he said this. I'm shocked that an evil, fascist old man who thinks he owns the world would admit something like this, rather than just keep it to himself like his contemporary Trump tries to do. That's what I'm shocked about. Not that he would be biased about blacks. But our winner, the worst, Robert Costa of CBS News. I have never for 1 minute gotten it about Costa. He basically started at the National Review. He moved to the Washington Post. Then Larry Kudlow put him on TV, and suddenly he had a rep. and not for having worked at the far-right facts-optional National Review. Then he went to CBS News, and they somehow still think, through several different bosses, they still think he's a reporter of some kind. In fact, they think he's like a star reporter. Costa and CBS, and again, they are in transition, and the cockroaches of the place like Costa are doing their best to survive what will be the new right-wing world of CBS News, in which Barry Weiss may be brought in to put the final spikes into CBS, as mentioned earlier. Costa had an exclusive bit of stenography. He talked to Trump. He interviewed, well, interviewed is a little strong. I wouldn't want to accuse Robert Costa of interviewing anybody, because that might imply that Robert Costa asked Trump questions Trump couldn't answer, or lie his way through, or couldn't say things that an ordinary reporter would recognize as simply being bullshit. And he sure as hell, Robert Costa, didn't do any of those things. He didn't ask any tough questions. He just wrote stuff down. The Costa headline on this exclusive bit of stenography: Trump commits to pursuing Russia-Ukraine peace. They are not ready yet, but, quote, something is going to happen, unquote. Like, what's the weather for tomorrow, Bob? There'll be weather. Thanks, Bob. Now here's sports. Here's what Costa wrote. Quote, President Trump told CBS News on Wednesday that he remains committed to pursuing a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine despite mounting uncertainty over the prospect of face-to-face talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And you know this is good reporting by Bob Costa because Zelensky's spelled with two Y's. He got that right. Mr. Trump characterized his position as both realistic and optimistic, and said he is closely monitoring how both leaders are handling this crossroads in the negotiations. Quote, I've been watching it, I've been seeing it, and I've been talking about it with President Putin and President Zelensky, Mr. Trump said in a phone interview. Something is going to happen, but they are not ready yet, but something is going to happen. We are going to get it done. That's the whole goddamn story. It's an exclusive bit of stenography. I know what you're thinking. Did this Costa follow up by asking if it isn't obvious by now that Trump has simply been stalling about Ukraine for 7 months? Maybe at Putin's instructions, certainly to Putin's benefit, and that Trump's references to 2 weeks, he's got 2 weeks, or 50 days, or soon, or something's going to happen, these are meaningless lies. And only a right-wing propagandist or a moron would repeat them as if they had any value other than serving to perhaps save the right-wing propagandist's job at CBS when the new regime comes into power. He did not follow up. Oh, what a shock! And he did not follow up because Robert Costa is not a reporter. Trump is stalling about Ukraine, and he's now used you, Costa, to help him stall, to regurgitate this same nonsense that something's going to happen soon, when it didn't happen the last 28 times Trump said something was going to happen soon, because Trump's a liar. And some people are willing to say that, and some people are not, and then there's that third category of people who are too stupid to recognize that it's true. I prefer the people who are lying about it to the people who don't recognize it. I suspect Costa is too stupid to recognize it. He's stalling about Ukraine. That is his job that Putin gave him to do. But he has help. But not according to Robert Costa, today's other worst person in the world. What'd you think of that one, Stevie? Was that a good show? Was I any good? Did you like the baseball part? What do you think? You've had enough surgeries. Do you need Tommy John surgery too? Well, you only have the 3 bad legs. What? I know, I went too long. I shouldn't ad lib. I'm much better when I pre-write everything. Me from notes is, well, you better have an hour. You're right. And instead I could be talking to you guys. What? December 1985 was already weird enough. I was doing well in L.A., being 3,000 miles away from everyone and everything I knew had been surprisingly helpful. And there was no ramp-up time for my work. I'd already won a couple of Best Sportscaster awards, and then the top all-news radio station was asking me to come over every afternoon and split the afternoon drive sportscasting shift with a guy who'd been on the air there literally for 30 years, who's one of the voices in the background in The Godfather Part 2. And now, somehow, my producer Ron Grelnick and I were headed to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel to go interview Mickey Mantle. For the average L.A. sportscaster, there really wasn't much reason to interview Mickey Mantle, which is why all of them at the bigger 3 network stations had turned down the offer of a sit-down interview. But I was a New Yorker and had been 3 months earlier, and thus Mickey Mantle was my idol. And moreover, when I became a baseball fan in 1967, my folks bought tickets specifically behind first base at Yankee Stadium because they had just moved Mantle there from the outfield. And as my dad said, when you are an old man, you will say the greatest thing you ever saw in baseball was Mickey Mantle. So you might as well see as much of him as you can. Well, I'm an old man now, and my dad was exactly right. Mantle was on a tour publicizing some kind of hitting video, and he would do one exclusive interview with an L.A. station at exactly 5 p.m. on that night in December 1985. And to get it, you had to agree to give the video exactly one plug and ask him one question about it. But otherwise, you could ask whatever you wanted. You had 15 minutes, then he was going out to dinner. Yeah, that was it, dinner. So Ron and I pulled up to the Beverly Wilshire in his car, and I had never been in, but I had walked past it a dozen times, and I knew there was a new wing and an old wing, and as Ron tried to park, I tried to find the room where Mantle would be waiting for us so I could be there to meet the camera crew that was joining us from some other shoot somewhere, and also because he was Mickey Mantle. I had met him before. I had even interviewed him briefly for CNN, but nothing like this, nothing like a sit-down interview, just me and him. The room number was something like 897. Could have been 597, could have been 1297, but it was basically the highest number there could be on a given hotel floor. And I saw the elevator just past the registration desk, and up I went to the 8th floor, and it was a deserted labyrinth. Turn after turn, and nobody there, and then suddenly I turned a corner, and walking towards me was the most elegantly dressed older couple I had ever seen to that point or since. She was wearing a mink stole atop a beautiful gown, and she had a diamond necklace big enough to induce cramps. She had a piercing, glistening set of deep brown eyes. She looked to be in her mid to late 50s, but might have been older. He was older, maybe 80, but with a full head of thick and wiry hair. He was tall, thin, extraordinarily elegant, in a perfect tuxedo. But all of this was overwhelmed, almost erased by one fact that startles me still 37 years later. This man was wearing a cape. I'm pretty confident that I had never seen a man wearing a cape before. I know I have not seen one since I have been looking, and yet it looked so good on him that I can recall briefly thinking, Keith, maybe you should buy a cape. This couple was perfect. We seemed to be the only people on the floor. The hallway wasn't all that wide. I said good evening as I passed. She said good evening, and in so doing revealed a British accent, and he mumbled good evening, and revealed what sounded like the lingering minor aftermaths of a minor stroke. They walked their way, I walked mine, and my focus returned to finding Mickey Mantle in room 897. The numbers of the rooms I was passing were like 811 and 814, and after a few more turns of the labyrinth, it dawned on me that I must be in the old wing of the Beverly Wilshire, and the high numbers like 897 must have been in the new wing of the Beverly Wilshire. I also noticed that I had not passed a doorway or a vestibule or some kind of connecting bridge to the new wing, so I had better make it back to the elevator and the lobby before Ron or the camera crew made the same mistake I had, because Mickey Mantle was waiting. I reversed course. I began to trot. After 3 or 4 more of these labyrinthine turns, I found, to my shock, that the perfectly elegant older couple, he was wearing a cape, was standing exactly where I had left them. She laughed. She mentioned something about the higher numbers being in the new wing, and everybody made that mistake. I thanked her, and then she said, "You're the young man who does the sports on the television, aren't you?" And I had gotten pretty popular pretty fast there, but being recognized was still very surprising, and pleasantly so, and I said that, and I introduced myself. "So nice to meet you," she said. "I'm Patricia Carlton, and this," she pointed to the guy in the cape, "is my husband." He slowly extended a hand, but shook mine vigorously. "And I'm Joseph Carlton." Mrs. Carlton was very excited. "You know, Joe and I, we really are not fans of the sports. But whenever we're at home in Palm Springs, we make sure we stay up until the end of the 10 o'clock news so we can watch you." Joe nodded and smiled in the cape. "You're so clearly enjoying yourself that we find ourselves enjoying it too. That's really quite remarkable." I was genuinely touched and remained so. I explained my dilemma. I treated them as you are supposed to treat viewers, gratefully and solicitously, and I asked them if they were going to the lobby and if I might walk with them so I didn't get any further lost. "We'd be delighted. I must ask you, Mr. Fishman, who does the news on your program, is that his real hair?" She saw my shock at the question. "Joe and I have often worn wigs, and we can't be certain. That means if it is a wig, it's a good one." We reached the elevator bank, and I pushed down. He was walking slowly. He must have had a stroke. Still, he was an imposing figure of a man, and not just because he was wearing a cape. As I steered them away from the subject of our anchorman's toupee and talked instead about my Mickey Mantle interview, I realized he looked extremely familiar, like I knew him. Joseph Carlton. Kept rolling the name over in my mind. And Patricia Carlton. Who are they? The elevator light went off and a very loud bell sounded. The doors opened and there was my producer Ron and the 2-man camera crew and the reporter who had been with them on the previous story, Sam Chu Lin, who had stayed with them because he wanted to meet Mickey Mantle. And as I joked to my new friends Joe and Patricia Carlton, "Oh look, here's my camera crew," its 4 members made no motion to even leave the elevator. They all looked dumbstruck. Sam Chu Lin's eyes looked like they were about to pop out of his head. I assumed this was because my new friend Joe was wearing a cape. Finally, I got the crew to move. I held the door open so Joe and Patricia could get into the elevator. I actually said, "Such a pleasure to meet you, and of course, thank you so much for watching Channel 5 News at 10. And she smiled warmly, and he managed a quick wave, and the doors closed. And only at that exact moment did it dawn on me where I knew him from. The blood now drained from my face as I turned to talk to the camera crew and Ron and Sam. You guys knew who those 2 people were, right?" Sam laughed at me. "Of course we did. Didn't you?" And I sighed. Oh my God, she said her name was Patricia Carlton, and that was her husband, Joseph Carlton, and she said it that way because she's British, and that's how, if you're British, you would say the name Cotton. She's Patricia Cotton, and he's Joseph Cotton, who was in Citizen Kane. I remember I actually put my hand on the wall and my face in my other hand. I just met Joseph Cotton, and I didn't recognize him. And the cameraman, Martin Clancy, who also often said things like this, said, "Pretty stupid of you, huh?" And I said, you have no idea how stupid. I mean, obviously, I know who Joseph Cotton is." And Sam Chu Lin said, "You sure about that?" I gave him a dirty look, and I said, no, it's worse than this. In 1948, the president of the International Joseph Cotton Fan Club was my mother. There is a picture of that man with my mother from like 37 years ago at the Stork Club. They all laughed. Then Sam Chulin said, in that photo, is he wearing that cape? My gaffe did serve to relax me a little for the interview with Mantle. My gaffe, when I get over it, I'll let you know. So anyway, we all reached room 897 or whatever it was in the new wing of the Beverly Wilshire. And as the crew set up, I managed to tell the story of the Cottons to Mickey Mantle. And he said, yeah, I saw them in the lobby a couple hours ago. He's a great actor. I met him in New York. Must be 30 years ago. Did you say hi? Oh, right. You just told me you didn't recognize him. Mickey Mantle was busting my chops. As I said, I had met him before, even interviewed him before, but this was our first sit down, and he was in a good mood, even expansive and playful. And at one point, he stunned me. I said, I know you only have a couple of minutes left, so forgive me if I'm bringing up something that takes more than a couple of minutes. And he interrupted, and he said, take as much time as you need. I'm enjoying us talking. So I asked him about this one subject, how he felt about what he did in his career, considering how injured he was. When he retired, Mickey Mantle was third all-time in homers. He hit 310 times. He played in 12 World Series on one bad knee and one worse knee. Mantle got very reflective and self-critical. We used this soundbite at the end of his obituary that I would do for ESPN a decade later. If I'd known I was going to live so long, he told me, I would have taken better care of myself and done better. I said, well, he'd done pretty good. I could have done better. I thanked him. Then as the cameraman moved to get the shots of me nodding and repeating a question or two, Mickey Mantle said, that was really good. I flushed. I got to ask you something. Can you give me some pointers? I suddenly had no idea what the word pointers meant. Pointers? What are pointers? Mantle said he was going to do some Yankee games the next year on cable with Mel Allen. I'm doing interviews after games. I'm no damn good at interviews. Just now you were moving from topics to topics so smooth. How do you keep all the questions in your head? Now I laughed. I didn't keep them in my head. Didn't you see my cheat card? And he laughed and he said no, and I showed it to him. I said, it's just a business card with like 7 key words written on the back. If I think I might freeze up because I'm nervous, because I'm interviewing Mickey Mantle, or I just met Joseph Cotton and I didn't recognize him, I make one of these cards, I hide it in the palm of my hand, and if I get stuck, I can just look down quickly and see one of the words, and I've got the question. I've got this card to remind me. Mickey Mantle's eyes glowed. But wait, he said, we're using these mics, and he pointed to the clip-on on his shirt, so you don't have to hold a mic. What do you do if you have to hold the mic like I'll have to in an interview after a ball game? What if the card would fall out, or you have to shake hands with the player? And I said, well, just write the words on your hand. Whichever hand is holding the mic, like below the thumb. Mickey Mantle looked at me as if I had just given him the secret of eternal life. Wow! He said, that's great. I'm going to write this down. Thanks. And we were packed up, and he actually walked me to the hotel room door and gave me a double-handed handshake. So it had been a big day, even if I didn't realize it was Joseph Cotton. Mickey Mantle had asked me for advice about anything. Somehow I had thought of something to tell him, and he was really happy about the advice. And, of course, this provided a punchline the following spring. We were in the studios at KTLA watching on the satellite feed as the Yankees' first cable telecast of the 1986 season ended, and sure enough, they threw it down to Mickey Mantle on the field interviewing some player, and one of our producers said, oh, let's see if he remembers the lesson you gave him, and another one said, here's your student, Mickey Mantle, and sure enough, after the first answer, Mickey Mantle pauses, and I know he can't remember what he wanted to ask next, and sure enough, I see him cheat his look down slightly towards the hand, holding the microphone, and the next thing I see, he's kind of tilted the microphone sideways, and he's asking the question, but you can barely hear him because the mic is pointing off at a 45-degree angle because he has written his key reminder words not below the thumb on the outside part of his hand, but on the palm side of his hand, and he's had to move the mic out of the way to read the words on the palm of his hand, and the producer says, "Ha ha ha, well now Mickey Mantle hates you." I swear I heard her say Carlton. If they release this new AI version of the Magnificent Ambersons, I'll watch it. Perhaps, if you're lucky, you're younger than I am and you missed all this, but 45 years ago, we were playing this same game, only with colorization. Ted Turner wanted to take all of the great black and white films and put them into colorization processes. And colorization processes in those days was like asking you to hold up a piece of wrapping paper, clear plastic cellophane of one color or another, and just hold it up and look at a black and white film through the cellophane. Oh, it's colorized. It looked like crap. And I thought, this looks like crap. On the other hand, even then, there were people who would not watch black and white movies. And suddenly, because they were colorized, however badly, and obviously they've gotten better with time, people were watching Casablanca, Citizen Kane, and all the other great films, the early Hitchcock films, to say nothing of silent movies that were colorized. They colorized Greed and put it on Turner, on TNT or TBS. Greed. Anyway. Maybe AI will do for the Magnificent Ambersons what the colorization of the early black and white classic films did for them. A new audience. Even now, The Magnificent Ambersons is a magnificent film. Imagine what it would be like to see it again. Plus, I can then go around and boast, I know the star of that film, Joseph Carlton. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Most of our countdown music was arranged, produced, and performed by Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, our musical directors of Countdown. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc., is the sports music. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. My announcer today was my friend Dennis Leary, and everything else was, as always, my fault. That's Countdown for today, day 232 of America held hostage again. Just 1,240 days until the scheduled end of his lame duck and lame-brained term, unless he is removed sooner by MAGA and Epstein, or the pavement on his hand, or the actuarial tables, or whatever. The next scheduled countdown is Thursday. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.